This history video looks at the period between 1900 and 1914 and looks at the dominant political forces and ideologies, in particular Weltpolitik. The two key German chancellors in the period before the First World War, von Bülow and Bethmann Hollweg, considered their main aim to be protecting the position of the ruling elites. That included the Kaiser, but also included Prussian landowners, the aristocracy, nobility and the upper class of the army. There were three demands being made by different groups in Germany, all of which presented different challenges for each chancellor. There was a significant demand for an aggressive, successful foreign policy. There was also a demand for constitutional reform. Liberals wanted to strengthen the power of the Reichstag and restrict the power of the Kaiser. There was also a significant demand for social reform from socialist and other left-wing groups and working class groups. Von Bülow, who became Chancellor in 1900, became Foreign Minister in 1897, was instrumental in devising the policies of Sammlungspolitik and Weltpolitik. Sammlungspolitik literally means the politics of concentration. To von Bülow, the greatest threat was the demands from socialists and the growth of socialism and potentially therefore communism. And so he decided on Sammlungspolitik, which was a way of building an alliance of lots of different groups against socialists. So in this alliance he'd bring in lots of conservative interests in the Reich. That would include conservative politicians, but also liberals, junkers, industrialists, and use them to present a broad front against the threat of socialism. And getting these groups involved was done by offering them a policy of protectionism and also the rallying of German small sections of society through the following of a very nationalist and successful foreign and colonial policy. That's Weltpolitik. Weltpolitik means world politics. Von Bülow himself said that only a successful foreign policy can help to reconcile, pacify, rally and unite. A key part of Weltpolitik was the building up of German armed forces, and in particular her navy. The Secretary of the Navy, Alfred von Tirpitz, united with von Bülow in developing the policy of Flottenpolitik, building up a navy which would rival Britain's. And Flottenpolitik really begins in 1898 when von Tirpitz pushed through the first navy law. He argued that a larger fleet was necessary for the protection of Germany's growing number of colonies and for Germany to be taken seriously as a great power. He wanted to build a navy of such strength that it would make any other naval power think twice before attacking it. The momentum for Flottenpolitik was maintained by the pressure group, the Navy League. A huge number of meetings being held by them and lots of very high-profile, noisy demonstrations. And this is a good example of the synthesis of popular pressure and government policy. It's very successful. The second naval law was passed in 1900, which put forward the building of 38 battleships over 20 years. There was a third naval law in 1906, which added another 6 battle cruisers to that building programme. Let's go back a little bit and look at how and why Weltpolitik emerged as government policy. And some of it comes from the Kaiser himself, and those historians who see the Kaiser as playing an integral part in German policy look at this and say, the Kaiser, he believed in Weltpolitik, that's why it was so important. And he certainly believed it was Germany's destiny to be a world power. And he surrounded himself with like-minded people. And he made 3 key appointments in 1897. Tirpitz as Navy Secretary, a guy called Count Posadowski, who became Interior Minister, and Bülow, who became Foreign Minister. And then 1897 therefore has to be seen as an important turning point in the drive for Germany to achieve world power status through Weltpolitik. It not only marked a decisive shift in the emphasis of Germany's foreign policy, but it also raised all manner of implications for the future of German domestic politics too. But it's not just the Kaiser who's pushing for Weltpolitik. There are a number of powerful forces at work in Germany which contributed to this new policy. Industrialisation had created economic demands. which meant that they needed to acquire raw materials and markets beyond Europe. There was also the ideology of German nationalism, which was being perceived in quite a different way by 1897. It was believed by some people that the survival of Germany as a leading nation state was necessitated, forced them to have a more active world policy. There were also economic changes and new intellectual currents, which contributed to the emergence of new political forces. Not only did the 1890s see the rise of the Social Democrats, but they also saw a series of populist right-wing movements, which I think reflects the radicalisation of the peasants and also the Mittelstand, the middle classes of Germany. These radical nationalists formed a series of pressure groups, and most infamous was the Pan-German League. They were anti-socialist, racist, anti-Semitic, expansionist, and therefore inevitably very strong supporters of any policy which advanced German power and influence. They popularised the message of Weltpolitik and generated a degree of mass support for the policy. They also exerted political pressure on the imperial government to pursue the policy to the full, but it sort of reflects back. It made the chancellors and the Kaiser think, yeah, this must be a really popular policy of Weltpolitik, because look at the fuss that people are making on the streets about it. The decision to expand the German navy was of central importance to Weltpolitik, as already said. Tirpitz recognised the importance of gaining parliamentary support and popular backing for the plans, and with those aims in mind, he was instrumental in the creation in 1898 of the Navy League, or the Flottenverein. This portrayed national expansion or naval expansion as a patriotic symbol of Germany's new status in the world. It generated a membership of over 1 million people, and this level of support meant that the naval bills of 1898 and 1900 and later were all passed in the Reichstag by substantial majorities. Weltpolitik succeeded because it achieved a greater acceptance across the whole political divide. It successfully rallied both the middle and upper classes and their political representatives in the Reichstag, got them behind the crown and behind the government. To some extent, it even reconciled the increasingly vociferous and loud mass of the population to the existing order, because it played on their feelings of patriotism and loyalty to the crown and enjoying success in being German. It was also a policy which closely coincided with the aspirations of the Kaiser, who convinced himself that domestic policy must therefore at last be under his personal rule. Despite all the success of Weltpolitik and the acceptance of it, Bülow still found government to be subject to ever-increasing pressures. Despite the close relationship he enjoyed with the Kaiser, Weltpolitik generated its own problems. The budget moved into deficit as the mounting cost of maintaining the army, expanding the navy, and running this growing empire took effect. It meant that substantial tax increases had to be introduced, and tax increases are never popular. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you found this useful. Please use this in addition to the notes that you've got from lessons and in the resources you've been given to help you understand Weltpolitik.